The embodiment of the Joker is not something that is painted on in the mirror. It's a little more skin deep. Like one day getting your tattoo equipment out and tattooing a Joker smiley face on the tip of your... Because you're bored. You just have no idea. But you're going to find out. Stay tuned.
So for all of you that say that Joker 1 didn't inspire some fringe types to be a bit weird, like listen to this comment. It makes perfect sense to me. Joker 1 terrified the powers that be. I believe what happened is that orders came from the top to assassinate Joker 1 because they couldn't risk the masses relating to Arthur. In reality, our elites are waging class warfare on a massive scale and they don't want us getting any dangerous ideas. This sounds insane. This sounds unhinged. This sounds like a manifesto and also just not true. All right. Neither of these films would have been made if this big, massive conspiracy from the Hollywood elites is like, this is insane. Hi, guys. I just want to apologize. I'm sure that this title is really bugging a lot of new people here. And I'm sure a lot of what I'm going to say is going to bug a lot of people too. I know the first Joker film means a lot to a lot of people. If you watch that first Joker film and you were genuinely moved by its exploration of mental health and societal issues, like I'm actually really happy for you. Genuinely. I'm not trying to be condescending. I never got that though. I was really disappointed with the first Joker film because going into it, I heard so much about, what it was going to say about society, how good of an exploration of mental health it was, and, the fact that it took like a famous comic book character and brought it down to earth in this really gritty exploration where it's almost not even interested in superhero canon or lore, but instead interested in telling a story like Charlize Theron's, Monster, or We Need to Talk About Kevin. And as a fan of Monster and We Need to Talk About Kevin, I left Joker pretty disappointed myself. I thought a lot of the writing around the mental health issues was simplistic and kind of frustrating and a bit beat over the heady.
All I have are negative thoughts.
And I thought the societal issues were kind of laughably thin. And unfortunately, at the core of this movie is an incredible performance from Joaquin Phoenix. But unfortunately, I felt like the script didn't really give him much more to do outside of his incredible baseline talent. There were excellent scenes. I love the stairway scene, for example, even if I find it weird that people see this as this like iconic triumphant moment. Because for me, when I watched that film, I thought the stairway scene was this horrifying realization that like, now that he's finally snapped and had a mental breakdown, he feels free. But regardless, I love that scene. I love the confrontation with Murray. And there are a few scenes scattered throughout that film that I did really appreciate. However, overall, again, I was disappointed. And I found the fan reception and the way people talked about this film after it came out even more frustrating.
To our culture than the Joker, about a movie that talks about mental illness not being taken seriously, about how people in high places look down and frown upon the poor, the poverty, and people with mental illness, and how we need to take this more serious. But no, forget all these fucking social problems that Joker touched upon. Let's have a better woke agenda, and let's go full fucking woke, and let's give Parasite, the first fucking thing they said, Parasite, the first foreign language movie to ever win Best Picture.
Way people would put on Joker makeup and make music videos talking about societal issues and think it was cool.
I forgot I'm better off alone. I forgot I care for everyone's happiness, but forget about my own.
Or the way people just kind of like took this story about a mentally ill man that had a breakdown and killed a bunch of people and instead saw it as this awesome, like tragic rise of a hero. I found strange. I definitely found strange. But on top of that, I found the way people that didn't watch many movies typically talk about the fact that this movie was like the be-all end-all exploration of mental health and society a bit weird. Like I didn't really agree. And over time, the kind of overblown praise, in my opinion, of that first film made me look back on it with a lot of kind of resentment and anger, which admittedly is unfair, right? It is really unfair to kind of dislike a movie more because of how it was received. But being completely transparent here, I struggled to remove the first Joker film from the way it was misappropriated, in my opinion. And what's interesting is this second film, right, Joker 2 Folie à Deux, seems to be interested in actually exploring that. The first film to me felt like it was meant to be a warning, a tragedy of what happens if you ignore these sorts of people in society and let these problems like bubble over to a point where crimes feel justified in this person's viewpoint. But after that movie, people were dressing up as Joker. going down to the stairwell, you know, people saw him as an absolute icon. There are audience reactions of that first Joker film where Joaquin Phoenix shoots Robert De Niro and people cheer as if it's the Endgame portals opening up. It's absolutely insane.
Oh, that's amazing. Oh, that's fucking great.
And what it feels like to me is Todd Phillips saw that reaction and was rather disappointed and went, really? I thought I made it very clear in the first film what the message was. It seems like what Todd Phillips is trying to say with the second film is, no, this guy is not a hero. You should not be rooting for him to become the Prince of Crime. You should not be going into a sequel to Joker and hoping that it's just Joaquin Phoenix and Lady Gaga fucking up society. You should be sitting there reflecting on that first film, feeling empathy for him and sitting there going, how did we get to this bubbling point? And that's why I really like that Joker 2 is a courtroom procedural. It is just really interested in exploring the fallout of that first film. I love the courtroom stuff in this movie. I thought it was such an interesting idea, such an inspired idea. I really was not looking forward to a sequel to Joker. So going into Joker 2, when I heard it was a courtroom drama, right? A procedural about whether Arthur Fleck and Joker are the same person or a result of split personality disorder, I went, ooh, what an interesting idea. However, then I thought back on the first film and went, wait, that's not really valid. It was abundantly clear to everyone that it was just Arthur Fleck, right? However, I was very relieved to see early on in the movie, this is actually a manipulation, all right? Like, it is a crackpot theory that the lawyer is proposing, a lie, a scheme, basically, that Arthur Fleck's lawyer is coming up with to basically get him out of trouble, get him out of the death penalty. And Arthur Fleck, as a result, needs to decide whether he's willing to lie and manipulate his fans and a jury to get away with what he did in the first movie or avoid the death penalty, right? And I found that idea really interesting. And personally, I thought the journey that Arthur Fleck goes on in this movie is actually rather more deep than people talk about. I think a lot of people have said that he is a static character. He ends the movie in the exact same place he started. And I kind of disagree, at least to an extent. In order to substantiate that idea, though, I'm going to have to talk about everything I liked and disliked in this movie and all my notable scenes and analysis of this film. So let's just go. First off, on a technical level, I absolutely love how this film looks. I loved how the first film looked. It was probably my favorite thing about that first film. Like, looking back on that first film, I will always look back on it and go, wow, sound-wise, visual-wise, just like, for the most part, an incredible experience. There's like one CGI shot where he bangs his head on the glass that looks crap. But aside from that, like, just an absolute beauty to watch. And Joker Folia, has a bigger budget, and as a result, it looks even better. Like, every single shot is striking. Like, scenes that don't even need to look that good look incredible. Like, just scenes of two people talking are just so beautiful to look at. It reminds me of what made Euphoria Season 1 such an interesting show, where it was like, there was such a heightened level of drama and emotion just by how good the technical presentation was. And I really like the technical presentation in Joker Folia. Let's get the elephant in the room out of the way. This one's a musical.
Let's build it.
And I like it for the most part. Now, I will say there are about 3 or 4 short little songs where two characters are having a conversation, and then instead of the conversation ending, it turns into basically a dialogue song. And I didn't like these sections that much. The one that really stands out to me is when Lady Gaga and Arthur Fleck are kind of talking and there's a screen between them, and I just didn't like it. You know, they were talking about something interesting. I believe they were talking about the fact that she is pregnant, and I really would have just loved to hear how both characters felt in that setting, and then it cut to a song that I don't think really added that much. It kind of felt fucking strange, to be honest. Now, you could make a defense here that the point is Harley Quinn in this movie, Lady Gaga in this movie, is a bit off her rocker. She is a Joker fanatic, and when he actually wants to interrogate her on the real world kind of fallout of having a baby and really see how this is going to work logistically, she just wants to sing and live in La La Land. Like, that is a defense. However, just narratively speaking and pacing wise, moments like this I didn't love. However, when this movie was not afraid to be a musical, when it was actually song and dance numbers that were clearly an escape from our reality, I thought they were fucking awesome. I absolutely loved the song in the courtroom where Joker is killing people left, right, and center. I think the song is The Joker Is Me. It's awesome. I loved it. Like, when it is actually being a full-on Broadway musical, Lady Gaga's vocal chops are awesome, and it's actually really interesting to see that, like, yet again, Arthur Fleck in these musical numbers is being used as a bit of a tool. He still doesn't fit in, and that's represented through the fact that his voice, yes, he can carry a tune, but he's clearly struggling. He's a chain smoker. He's getting punched and beat up all the time, and as a result, like, his singing sounds anguished and painful. On top of that, I've seen a lot of people say that tonally, right, these musical numbers don't really fit. And I actually think that's kind of the point. Like, similar to the first film, right? The whole idea of a guy who's sad inside walking around with a permanent or a make-up smile all the time is highlighting that duality, right? And here it just feels like that metaphor extended. You have these really upbeat, you know, song and dance numbers, and then you cut back to reality and it's a dark and brutal world for Joaquin Phoenix, all right? Like, he has these brief moments where he escapes to this beautiful fantasy land just to be like, you know, rush back to a really grim reality. And I like that, especially when the courtroom section, right, is him fighting for his life. He's trying to get off the death penalty and he still can't help but go off into this fantasy world. And I like the thing that sets him off in that delusion is that girl he liked in the apartment building from the first film talking about all the awful things his mother said, and he just can't handle it. So he leaves into this other dimension. I really like that. Also, notably, I'll get into it more with Lady Gaga's manipulation of Joaquin Phoenix, but that section where she is behind the massive amount of pianos and singing about, like, we're going to build a mountain, which is an idea that she's built into him. It actually kind of reminded me of the song number in Chicago where the lawyer is using the main character, the main woman, as a puppet for what he's actually saying. It feels like at this point it's a metaphor for here's the dancing man on stage and Lady Gaga is the one behind pulling the strings. It almost feels like a very intentional reference to that Chicago musical number, but I think narratively it's actually quite interesting to frame their dynamic that way. On top of that, I also really liked the first song number in front of the TV where he starts singing and dancing in front of the other jail members. I liked that one because for a while it felt like it was actually in universe and it felt like how all the other characters would actually respond, but unfortunately this was also a dream sequence. The only issue I had with this movie being a musical were the ones that could have just been talking, all right? But when the film really went for like full-on Chicago-like musical numbers, I thought it was really cool. So yeah, that was the courtroom one and the song about building a mountain, and there was another song, or it's one of these ones where like Lady Gaga and Joaquin Phoenix were walking down the aisle to get married, which I really liked, especially after the Mr. Puddles scene. I really liked the fact that Mr. Puddles was dancing in the background in one of those scenes. It shows what a break from reality is, right? Because this is after Mr. Puddles' just harrowing confession to Arthur Fleck. Now, the rest of the movie is following either Arthur Fleck in jail or in the courtroom up until the very end of the movie. And I really like these sections. I thought it was really kind of slow, but in a really interesting way. I love the opening scene with the cartoon section. I thought that was really fascinating. Yes, kind of an inaccurate description of the first film in my opinion, but I think given where the plot goes, that feels rather justified. I thought Brendan Gleeson as the guard was excellent. I don't even think he was underused here. I thought he was really, really good. And again, represented the movie's overall theme of what everyone wants from Arthur Fleck. The people that support him, the people that worship him, the people that are in love with him, the people that hate him, they are twisting him in all these different directions. And personally, I think the way Arthur Fleck is characterized in this film and the way his journey is explored kind of makes some of my issues with that first film kind of leave a bit. You know, a lot of my issue with the first movie and its audience was the fact that people are like, man, the first movie just highlights the fact that society is broken and doesn't care about us and treats us too poorly, and like Joker's uprise was actually really powerful, and it was a pushback against the powers that be. And I actually thought that the movie was a bit more complicated than that, and it's not that cut and dry. I don't think you were meant to be sitting there at the end of the movie when an uprising happens against Gotham and really be cheering for that. Like, I don't know. Like, I thought that there were a few situations in that first film where Arthur Fleck came off, like, objectively bad. And I've always struggled to decide whether that first movie was condoning what Arthur Fleck was doing or not. You know, like, for example, it felt like the movie really wanted me to feel bad for Arthur Fleck when he got fired and when Thomas Wayne beat him up. But in my opinion, when I watched those scenes, I didn't feel too bad. You know, like in that section where Thomas Wayne punched him, I don't know if this is a hot take or not, but like on my end, I was sitting there going, okay, like, to be fair, Arthur Fleck went over to Thomas Wayne's house and stuck his thumbs in Thomas Wayne's child's mouth. That's an insane thing to do. And I don't think Thomas Wayne owes him much of anything. And I genuinely ask you guys at home, if someone came over to your house and stuck their fingers in your sister's mouth or your son's mouth or your mum's mouth, would you give them the time of day? Because I certainly wouldn't. Now, I wouldn't punch them in the face. I would not punch them in the face. But if they didn't leave me alone, like, yeah, I would have my guards up. It was a weird, strange thing to do. But I've never really understood whether that first film wanted me to feel bad for him in that section. And I think it did. And clearly, a lot of the audience felt bad for him too, because they really wanted to see Thomas Wayne suffer. That was kind of why I struggled with the reception to that first film, is because a lot of people seem to see, you know, Arthur Fleck shooting Robert De Niro in the face and this uprising happening as a victory rather than this like tragic tale. And I always found that weird because, again, there were a few situations where I was like, oh, I don't know about that one. Another one, for example, is when he bought a gun to the children's hospital. No, that was like an insane thing to do. Now, do I understand that someone else gave him the gun? Yeah, of course. But if you bring a gun to a children's hospital and it falls out of your coat pocket, you will get fired. I did not think society was awful for firing Arthur Fleck. Now, I will say, society failed him by not then checking on his mental health, not making sure that he had proper mental health supports. Absolutely. But if I have to look at the situation of Arthur Fleck getting fired, I do think that one was on him, mental health or not. That was a strange thing to do. And I don't think the cop-out of, oh, well, someone gave him the gun is a massively good excuse, you know? Like, I think he needed to be fired. That was insane. In this second film, instead of looking at the events of the first film as this like victory against society and this incredible moment where this mentally ill, tortured man took back the power and stuck it to the man, the second film does really seem interested in saying, you know what, we understand how he got here, we understand how society failed him, but what Joker did was bad. And Arthur Fleck acknowledges that. Throughout the movie, Arthur genuinely seems remorseful. The best scene of this movie is when he's on trial and Mr. Puddles comes and testifies and says, you know what, like, yeah, okay, maybe that guy fucked you over with the gun a bit, but he did not deserve that. On top of that, Arthur, you were one of the only people that was ever nice to me, and I was terrified of you. And to me, this feels like actual good writing about mental health and disenfranchisement, because you see this moment where Arthur Fleck got so wrapped up in violence and revenge and anger that he then became a powerful, scary figure to those below him. You know, people that used to actually genuinely see him for who he is are now terrified for him. They don't believe in this facade. They don't believe in this tough guy thing. They genuinely liked and resonated with Arthur and cared about him, you know, and went over to his house to check on him. And now Mr. Puddles is terrified of him. It's this great moment. And you see Arthur take some pause and go, oh, is this Joker facade, is this whole thing I'm doing really worth it when people that were in a similar boat to me or even below me in some aspects, you know, Mr. Puddles' life as a disabled man is probably just a horrific experience, especially in the world established in the first film. And in that sense, Arthur Fleck is in somewhat of a higher position in society than Mr. Puddles, and he failed him. You know, and I really think that scene is just so effective to go, you know what, maybe you did understand Arthur. Maybe even you got behind him and you understood his rage and his disenfranchisement. But the way he went about it was, you know, not great. And there are repercussions to that. So circling back to what I was saying before, where in the first film, I felt like there were a few instances where it went for the empathy, it went for the sympathy for Arthur Fleck, and it didn't really work for me due to logistical things, due to logical things, due to emotional things. In this film, pretty much every single emotional beat they tried to go for with Joker or Arthur Fleck really worked for me. And the reason for that is he's done the bad thing already and he clearly regrets it. He doesn't really stand by it. He doesn't feel great about it. He kind of acknowledges himself it's an outburst. And to me, it looks like this really interesting reflection on, okay, society and the world was so cruel to him that it got him to a boiling point where he lashed out, and now he's having to come back down to earth rather than become the prince of crime and fuck yeah society that everyone wanted. Instead, he's drawn back to reality, and he has to reckon with the fact that, oh my God, like I did these awful things despite feeling justified in the moment, and now my life's over. And no one is showing me understanding of how I got there or how I was treated. Nothing, you know? And the prison guards are awful. They are constantly mocking him and taunting him. And in the first film, this felt a bit exaggerated and silly and like really kind of coincidental. But in this one, it feels targeted and mean, you know, given his actions in the first film that are clearly a product of mental illness. These guards are picking on him and bullying him and provoking him constantly, and the discourse around him feels really unfair. In the first movie, there are a lot of moments where I'm like, well, how is that person supposed to know you were mentally ill? You know, it felt like the messaging of the movie was like, oh, look at how all these people are failing him. I'm like, but given what they know, they're kind of acting normally. Again, Thomas Wayne after the finger blasty of the mouth. But in this movie, everyone knows who Arthur Fleck is. Everyone knows that he killed Robert De Niro. Everyone knows that he's unwell. It was a cry for help. He is not right in the head. And they're either worshipping him as a false god, aka all the people that dress up like him and appear in court for him, or they are just being relentlessly cruel and mean to him like he was a mentally well man that did all these things. You know, like the guard that asked him to sign the book and then mocks him and goes like, oh, this is going to sell like hotcakes when this guy gets the chair. You know, this world in the second film, much more in my opinion, hits the awful, disgusting way that our society treats people that are mentally ill and have actually committed crimes. To me, this film, if you're a true crime fan, I actually think you would like this movie. It reminded me a lot of the Jeffrey Dahmer show and the new Menendez show, which has kind of become my personality for the past couple of weeks. But to me, it felt like, yeah, this commentary on our obsession with true crime, the way we make them simultaneous heroes and kind of disregard all the gritty, icky stuff that got them there and just kind of see them as these like heroes or sex symbols or just get obsessed with the case rather than the person themselves. It's commenting on the exploitation. In fact, it even feels like it's kind of picking on the first film to a degree and saying, you know, did we do that in the first film? Did we kind of make a hero out of a misunderstood monster? And it feels like they're kind of backtracking in a sense, but in my opinion, in a really effective way. Another criticism I saw of this film is that it is a film that is clearly written by feminists and hates what they did for disenfranchised men in the first film, and they want to undo that through Lady Gaga and her appearance and how they punish Arthur Fleck in this movie. I disagree. So let's get into that. This movie does punish Arthur Fleck. This movie is not punishing Arthur Fleck for being a straight white male, and it is also not punishing Arthur Fleck as a metaphor or a way to punish people that actually kind of resonated with the first film. That's an insane idea. However, what I would say is, if anything, it's actually take it further. If you thought the first film showed how poorly, specifically mentally unwell men can be treated, this film is just doing more of that. It's turning it up to 11 and, in my opinion, giving a much more grounded, systemic approach. Let's just talk about the really big controversial scene of this movie. There's a moment towards the end of the movie where Joker, Arthur Fleck, is flat out sexually assaulted. All right, he gets raped by a bunch of the guards. And I don't want to hear in the comments like, oh, you're reading too much into it, bro. He just got beat up. This movie shows countless times people being beat up, Arthur being beat up. If they were going to show that, they would have shown that. The fact that it cuts away and then hard cuts to him being dragged out and it's a shot of his underwear is an implication that Arthur Fleck was assaulted. And he was assaulted not because of some like sexual thing they have for him. He was assaulted as a power move. He went up in court and testified against the guards and said how awful they were to him. So they did an unspeakable thing to him. Something that, as a mentally unwell man, even the most mentally sound people, if they go through something like that, are too terrified to talk about it. And it completely crushes Arthur. I have not seen anyone talk about this, and I think it's actually a really important thing to talk about. The idea I've seen online of people being like, they took our hero, they took Joker, who was going to be the prince of crime, and gay butt raped him, is just so juvenile and silly. And I can't believe we actually have to sit here and explain what happened towards the end of the movie, but let's get into it, all right? So Arthur Fleck was assaulted after he spoke out about abuse he was experiencing. Clearly, these guards went, oh, we'll give him something that he can't even talk about. We're going to, absolutely scar him. And this is what makes Arthur Fleck throw in the towel. All right, this brings him back down to where we saw him at the start of the first Joker, to that person we initially empathized with, just the way Mr. Puddles did. Now he is broken. He doesn't want to be the prince of crime. He doesn't want to kill people anymore. I don't even think he's interested in saving his own life or not, because he's realizing how he's inflicted pain on others, and pain has just been inflicted on him, a pain that he's never really properly experienced before, that he can't even comprehend. And he realizes that, you know what, for some people that didn't have the upbringing that I have had, where I was constantly physically abused, seeing this sort of violence, seeing what I did to Robert De Niro, seeing what I did to the guy when I stabbed him in the eye of Mr. Puddles, you know what, like, some people don't need to be subjected to that, the same way I didn't need to be subjected to what the guards did to me. And he throws in the towel, and these people, these critics, these fans that are mad that Arthur Fleck throws in the towel after this movie, I think are lacking a lot of empathy and understanding of, like, not even male sexual assault, but just sexual assault in general. And I also think the idea that we're annoyed that Joker was a film for the mentally unwell, disenfranchised men and it was exploring men's issues is also a bit reductive. I don't watch movies starring females about sexual assault or mental health and go, oh, well, I can't relate to this because it's about women. And I don't think women were watching the first Joker movie going, oh, it's just a bunch of silly men. Like, no, not really. I'm sure you can find some radical feminists somewhere that were doing that. But for the most part, on my end, I saw a bunch of girls I went to high school with posting stories about the first Joker film, talking about how it was this really effective commentary on mental health. And I think this idea that Lady Gaga and all these elements that kind of seem to punish Arthur Fleck or show how cruel life can be to someone like Arthur Fleck is a result of, like, feminist messaging or wanting to punish a movie that was interested in men's mental health is fucking insane. And another reason that's insane is because Lady Gaga is not a good fucking person in this movie. One of the best moments of this movie is when you realize she's lying about mental illness. You know, she's faking a mental illness. She doesn't need to be in the hospital. She's admitted herself there because she just wants to meet Arthur Fleck, the hero that is the Joker. That's really interesting. On top of that, she lies to him about being pregnant with his baby. Like, that's an awful thing to do. If anything, that actually is rather anti-feminist and is validating red pill talking points about how you're never going to really know if the child is yours or not. And, you know, these women just want to, like, trap you and manipulate you, yada, yada, yada. That's what Lady Gaga's character is doing. She's obsessed with that Joker D, but not Arthur Fleck's D, not at all. And I think her character was really well done, because the fact that she just disregards him on the stairs in that way feels really cruel at the end of the movie. So let's talk about things I didn't like. I did overall like the car bomb section where he escapes very briefly, because it feels like an intentional misdirect, a bit of a tease. However, I was really enjoying the courtroom stuff, and I felt like the courtroom stuff never hit its peak except for that Mr. Puddle scene the way I wanted it to. I was never really like, oh, is he going to get out of this or not? It kind of just blew it up. It ended the court case prematurely. However, I did like the fact that for a second he seems to want to escape, and, you know, all these fanatics are talking to him and hyping him up and being like, oh, you can be the Joker, let's go, we got you out, yada, yada, yada. And he's not interested. He's scared of what he's created, which I like. You know, I like that in the first film he had this outburst and he regrets it now. You know, it was this heat of the moment thing, and he can't keep up with this accidental movement he's created. And I like when he meets up with Lady Gaga, and Lady Gaga again basically like undermines that weird talking point that men's rights had, where she says like, oh, I'm not really into you anymore, and the baby's not real, goodbye. He throws in the towel there, he gets arrested, and let's talk about the ending. So this part I'm a bit torn on, but I really do not like the fallout that this ending has had. I like that he goes back to jail, and I like that he is killed by his creation. That is the interpretation of the ending, all right? You're meant to sit there and go, oh, Arthur Fleck looked up to Robert De Niro, right? And Robert De Niro let him down, so Arthur Fleck made a joke about you get what you deserve and shot him. Arthur Fleck accidentally created a bunch of fans for himself. He is now in the position of Robert De Niro, right? And a bunch of his fans who really loved him are now really disappointed. You know, and it's shown this guy throughout the movie being really inspired by him, and he's disappointed. So he goes up to Arthur Fleck, and makes a similar joke, I think basically summarizing the movie to an extent, and goes, "You get what you deserve," and kills him. And then in the background, while Arthur Fleck is dying, he carves like a smile into his face. Now, first off, I like this ending. I actually really like this ending. I think it's profound and interesting, and I would have preferred if it was someone we had a bit more character substance with. Like, I actually would have preferred if these two people were friends throughout the movie. I think that would have been better, or even if Lady Gaga killed him. But I don't mind the fact that they're going to kill Arthur Fleck. I think it solidifies just how cruel the world is to Arthur. It was cruel to him when he was down here. It was cruel to him when he was up here in some people's eyes. Like, it just beat him down. He was sexually assaulted. He was murdered. He was stabbed. Like, he just went through it all. And I think this second movie gives us a lot more empathy. Like, if we watch the first movie now, knowing what this leads to, you know, instead of it being this weird, twisted victory at the end of the movie, you go, oh my God, like, he's going to end up in jail, stabbed, mistreated, misused, misrepresented. He gets assaulted and then he gets stabbed. I think it makes the first film, in my opinion, feel a lot more tragic and a lot more harrowing and a lot more effective. Also, I think the fact that this second movie is a musical makes some of the clunky writing, like out of this world writing in the first film, maybe feel a bit more intentional. But yeah, I think it's an interesting ending. I just wish there was more of a relationship between the two. I didn't like how random it felt. It felt a bit like, oh, fuck it. I guess it is just meant to be a plug-in for the fact that all his fans wanted him to be something and they can't handle the fact that he isn't. The thing I don't love, though, about this ending is the fact that people are sitting here and just talking mad, dumb shit. All right, these movies were never meant to actually be Joker goes and fights Batman. So first off, I don't want to hear anyone sitting here complaining like, he was meant to be the Prince of Crime. This was meant to be an origin story. He was meant to fight Batman and he's not fighting Batman. How was Arthur Fleck ever going to fight Batman? This version of Arthur Fleck is not smart. He's not cunning. The whole point was he accidentally stepped into the Joker. He accidentally created this movement. He doesn't know what to do. It's not even like Heath Ledger in The Dark Knight where he goes, oh, if I ever caught a car, I wouldn't know what to do with it. Like, Arthur Fleck is borderline not interested in a movement. He felt really happy for a second when he put the blood on his face. That's it. Aside from that, Arthur Fleck is not well. He can't even fuck right. The sex scene with Lady Gaga was one of the most uncomfortable sex scenes I've ever seen, and it does a really good job of showing just how sheltered and childish Arthur Fleck is. Like, he has no idea how to even like have sex, right? Like, Lady Gaga has to kind of like get it moving for him, and he's not even thrusting. It's this bizarre, it feels like a horrifying version of that scene in The Inbetweeners where Will has his first time. It's this like horrific, strange, uncomfortable like sex scene, and I think it does a really good job because it takes someone who a lot of people who, in my opinion, misunderstood that first film, it takes someone who they see as a hero and, you know, kind of makes him look a bit ill-equipped and unsure of himself and childish and like scared and really kind of infantilizes him. I think it was really well done and actually kind of a tragic scene. I really liked the sex scene. But the reason I bring all this up is Arthur Fleck, this version of Arthur Fleck was always meant to be like a Taxi Driver type story. This was always meant to be kind of almost like the way Riverdale is to Archie comics. It was meant to take the kind of iconography and just be a story like Taxi Driver. Just be a story like We Know to Talk About Kevin. Just be a story that's exploring a mentally ill character. He was never going to fight Batman. All right, this is such a weird complaint. I almost don't even want to humor it. Harley Quinn and him were never going to become like actual mastermind criminals. Like, it's Joker inspired almost. You know what I mean? It's Batman inspired. I think Harvey Dent and stuff are here because you already know what they represent. Like, it's kind of banking on what you know they are, so you can then use it as like context for the world of Arthur Fleck. Does that make any sense? In this universe, it's using these pre-established Batman characters to basically kind of be fill-ins for what they represent, right? You see Harvey Dent as the kind of young, cocky, arrogant guy that's just trying to take advantage of Arthur Fleck's case to become the mayor. You see Thomas Wayne as the rich, privileged billionaire who doesn't do enough for the city around him. But no, it's not trying to be this constant comic book origin story. It's probably not helping my case that I'm going to bring up Megalopolis, but it reminds me of Megalopolis where it's set in modern day, right? Or set in this weird alternate future, but it's using the story of the Roman Empire. You know, it's using these things you already kind of know, even though they're clearly different characters and presenting themselves in different ways. And the reason I bring all this up is there are genuinely people that are furious at the ending of this movie because they think what it's implying at the end of the film when the guy cuts the smile into his mouth is like, oh my God, they're saying that this becomes Heath Ledger's Joker. This is so stupid. This is so stupid. First off, like Harvey Dent's in this movie and he just got like blown up. That is not what Harvey Dent looked like in The Dark Knight. The timeline doesn't make any sense. Like this is a stupid theory. I'm really sorry. I don't like it. All it is this guy in the background kind of becoming what he wanted Arthur Fleck to be because Arthur Fleck can't and won't do it anymore. All right. It's showing that the idea that Arthur Fleck accidentally created can be anyone, all right? They're all going to keep carrying on his message long after he's dead. The same way the people that are wearing makeup like him, people that are wearing masks like him, are going to keep doing the same shit that he did that one night when he shot Robert De Niro, you know? They're going to keep pushing back against the society. And it's an idea that escaped Arthur Fleck. It is not trying to be some setup for The Dark Knight or Heath Ledger's Joker. And, you know, you can sit here and get into this really technically specific argument of like, oh, well, why didn't he just use the blood and paint it on his face? I don't know, all right? He already had a knife in his hand. He's mentally unwell. He just did it because he's mentally ill and he wants to feel like he's the new Arthur Fleck, all right? And he's the real face of the Joker. And he's not going to become the Prince of Crime either because in this world, the prison guards are probably going to beat him up, bum him, and throw him in a worse cell. You know, like, what do you expect to happen? It is not saying at all that this is Heath Ledger's Joker. And I don't even think overall it's getting at the point that this is the real Joker. It's just another mentally ill person. He's already in Arkham. And this isn't like Arkham from the comics where he's going to constantly escape. Like, he'll probably die in jail too. He's going to start a bit of an uprising, whatever. But I don't think he meant to be sitting there thinking about all of this. It was literally just meant to be a thing of like, okay, Arthur Fleck was killed by what he accidentally created. And even though he kind of renounced the Joker identity and the chaos he created, people in this world are going to keep doing it and keep that message alive, even though it killed him. That's it. That is it. It is a literal metaphor in the background of that happening. And the fact that he's cutting it into his face just shows he's really passionate, all right? I think the takeaway I've seen online of, oh my God, what did we watch 4 hours of these movies for if, like, he wasn't even the real Joker? You guys sound like the fanatic weird fanboys in this movie. Sorry, like you do. Like sitting there being like, who even cares about this mentally ill Arthur Fleck guy if he's not even the real Prince of Crime? Like you guys are treating Arthur Fleck the way you were complaining the society in this world treated him. You know, like, do you not realize that? Complaining that like this guy that just got like completely fucked over by the world, completely abused by the legal system, the media, the court TV, he got abused by the guards, stabbed by his own creation, and you're sitting there going, oh, what the fuck was that about? Oh, he's just some mentally ill guy. He's not even the real Joker. Sorry.
Like in the first Joker movie, right? Arthur Fleck is complaining to the audience that if you saw him on the street, you would just walk by and not say anything. And now people are finishing both movies who previously cared for and rooted for Arthur Fleck going, oh, well, if he's not the Prince of Crime, why do I care? Like you literally sound like the problematic characters in these movies. You sound like his fanatic fanboys that disregarded him when he's not the Joker anymore. And you sound like the people that ignore him and his suffering because he's not what you want him to be. Like, it's insane.
All right, so while I'm here, I'm just going to talk about some like weird points I've seen, some things that back up my issue with the critical reception of this movie, and why I do actually think to an extent the concerns of the fallout of the first film are kind of validated. You know, a lot of people in the first film were like, oh, it's going to cause an incel uprising and toxic thoughts. And then people really pushed back against that. And they were like, no, it's just a movie. No acts of violence ever happened. But there were a lot of weirdos that you see on Reddit with like, you know, Joker thumbnails saying weird shit in weird forums. There was a weird trend of everyone like putting on Joker makeup and then like doing rap music videos where they're doing like bad shit.
I forgot I'm better off alone. I forgot I care for everyone's happiness, but forget about my own.
I got kids and I'm a Christian.
Like, it was a bit strange, right?
Come join my circus. I'm recruiting.
Yes, no one went on mass murder sprees, but inadvertently, like after the first Joker, like no, there were a few people that were kind of fringe types, kind of incel-y weird. That did start appropriating that first film and using it to kind of be like, oh, this is me, my true self. Like, it was strange.
I get we've all been through some shit. There's a lot of us that are damaged. I'm going through a fucked up divorce right now. The embodiment of the Joker is not something that is painted on in the mirror. It's a little more skin deep. Like one day getting your tattoo equipment out and tattooing a Joker smiley face on the tip of your dick. Because you're bored. You just have no idea. But you're going to find out. Stay tuned.
We see this in this men's rights post I mentioned earlier. Like let me read this, all right? This Joker sequel couldn't have been worse if it was a 2-hour movie of a line of feminists queuing up to shit on a copy of the first Joker movie. It focuses on a female character who happens to be played by someone who is a notorious feminist man-hater and turns the serious subject matter of the first movie, male alienation and struggling, into a musical, which is just a further excuse to showcase the vile feminist next album. The first movie got lambasted by many groups because it dared insinuate that society doesn't treat straight white men like kings and might not actually care about them at all. Sounds like they had to correct that in the movie and go back to conforming to the approved societal dogma. Behavior like this kind of validates why people were worried about the first movie in a weird way. Now, I thought the concerns about that first movie were unfair, but this shit doesn't really help. Comments like this I find concerning and confusing. They realize people radicalized themselves against the rich and against capitalism in 2019 over the Joker, so they humiliated him. They destroyed him, and then they killed him. Like, yeah, this reads like you thought Arthur Fleck and Joker was some kind of hero against society, and you genuinely believe that the powers that be are trying to stop that. Does the second movie showing the world as even crueler, showing more systemic violence, systemic sexual assault against men, showing how cruel the world can be to men, does that not actually validate the idea that greater society is kind of awful to those below it anyway? Like, if you thought the first film was touching on brave things, is this film not also doing that? Like, I'm very, very confused. This comment here kind of sums up my issue with the core Joker fan base that happened after the first film. Second movie should have been Joker causing mayhem and nothing else. No trial, no musicals, no BS. Like, that's the issue, right? Like, you weren't ever watching these films as these dark, somber looks into someone with mental health struggling in the world. You wanted to see a movie, a wish fulfillment movie, where a guy just kills a bunch of people because you feel hard done by in life. Like, that's what this reads like. If you watch the first film and genuinely were like, yeah, I want a sequel where Joker just keeps punishing people and they go on a massive crime spree, and that'll show the world, that'll show society, it's strange. It's a really strange response to what I thought the first film was saying. I actually do really like these comments, though. I feel like they're actually really well measured and well thought out comments, and I agree completely. So this is from Spunky66. This series has always been about exposing abuses against the mentally ill. Why are people acting like someone assaulting him sexually is so outlandish. Agreed. Again, we have more ridiculous criticism. Hollywood didn't like the first movie because of its critique on poverty and politics, so the media tried to make it fail. The first movie made $1 gazillion. It won 2 Oscars. It was up for Best Picture. It was up for Best Picture. What do you mean Hollywood didn't like it? All right, it was a massive success. If the evil Hollywood elite were really against any sort of messaging like this, really against mentally unwell men this hard, no, this movie never would have been made. This conspiratorial line of thinking is just nuts. So for all of you that say that Joker 1 didn't inspire some fringe types to be a bit weird, like, listen to this comment. It makes perfect sense to me. Joker 1 terrified the powers that be. I believe what happened is that orders came from the top to assassinate Joker 1 because they couldn't couldn't risk the masses relating to Arthur. In reality, our elites are waging class warfare on a massive scale, and they don't want us getting any dangerous ideas. This sounds insane. This sounds unhinged. This sounds like a manifesto, and also just not true. All right. Neither of these films would have been made if this big, massive conspiracy from the Hollywood elites is like, this is insane. No one is walking around being like, oh, we need to stop. The unwell people are actually going to rise against us and put a stop to us. Like, Arthur Fleck didn't even really achieve that in the first one. He just shot a TV host. Like, let's chill out a bit. I like this comment. It does sum up my thoughts. I feel like something missing in this discussion is the symbolic wrestling match between Arthur Fleck and Joker. Joker gets all the support and the love. Arthur gets none. Eventually, when Arthur admits he is not Joker, the show is over with the mask of entertainment dying. Everyone loves the show. No one loves the man behind the show. Eventually, when the fantasy is over, the entertainment will kill the man. That's why the Joker kills Arthur at the end of the movie. It's a good little summary. And this is one of my favorites. Spoilers, I guess. The reason is simple: gay ass raping your protagonist, then publicly humiliating him by crying in court and making his girl leave him on the spot while his ass probably hasn't healed yet, and then a random killing him is objectively a shit ending. The lack of empathy here is insane. And you know what? This is on Moon's video, and this is really concerning behavior. I talked about why I thought the sexual assault scene early in the movie was actually really effective, but this line of thinking is awful and does actually show why the first Joker did have a partially toxic fan base, right? They've watched a movie where someone is truly just horrifically treated by the world around him, and it seems like they don't respect him because he was crying in court afterwards, and they kind of have lost respect for him for being assaulted in that way. It's awful. Also describing it as gay ass, right? Like, are we serious? Just awful, and shows that these people that claim to really truly understand these movies kind of don't. And it's not the type of people you would want supporting your movie. I kind of get why Todd Phillips wanted to make a movie to piss these people off. Also, shout out to Moon for making like a bad video. Like, his video on Joker 2 was bad. It was ill-informed. It sounded like he hadn't even seen the movie properly. And a lot of the issues he was complaining about were just issues he complains about in every single video essay ever, to kind of fulfill this running narrative that every issue with modern day cinema is the Hollywood elites.
That's when absolutely nothing happened and they saw how much people really liked it, they were happy to pile on the awards, with Joker winning 2 Oscars later that year despite the lukewarm reception Hollywood gave it on release. While it might have been hard for critics to wrap their heads around it, the Joker explored themes that have become incredibly rare in modern movies. They even took out some of the most important parts of the character's background. Instead of the Joker managing to indoctrinate a trained medical professional, she's just another patient at Arkham. It's another choice that only really serves to make this version of the Joker even more pathetic. There was a lot to justify. The film needed a reason to actually have been made, but it never finds a good one. Instead, the 2 real reasons it created slowly became clear. First, it clearly wants to sabotage the first film and its audience, either by twisting parts of the story it established, or by reframing its characters in different ways.
It's like, maybe you just didn't like a movie. Like, it's not that deep, man. Like, he's one of those people that keeps going like, oh, Hollywood hates original ideas. And it's like, to be fair to Joker 2, like, even if you don't like it, for a mainstream movie, it was rather out there. It opened with a weird animated sequence. It has heavy themes of assault and abuse. It has weird musical song numbers. Like, it is a massive left turn. Say what you will about it, but just the fact that it's a sequel doesn't mean it's not an original idea. And this consistent narrative that, like, there are no good movies out in Hollywood anymore is so annoying. Like, go to my Letterboxd and look at the films I've rated every year. But every year I struggle to put together a top 10 because it's like Challenges, Dune Part 2, The Substance, Speak No Evil, fucking A Different Man. Like, there are so many good movies coming out all the time. This week on my roster of what I need to watch is stacked. All right, so this idea that no good movies come out and Hollywood sucks and all these elites don't care about it's just so tired. Like, stop.
A humiliation ritual for a director that stepped out of line. Hollywood destroyed this franchise because the original was not supposed to succeed. Not supposed to succeed? They gave it a pretty impressive budget. It won 2 Oscars. It was nominated for Best Picture. What do you mean? If this movie was actually not meant to succeed, it wouldn't have even been close to the Oscar sphere. Or like, what are you talking about? Why would they have made a sequel if this was just somehow this movie that escaped the evil Hollywood system that doesn't want this sort of messaging around? All right, like, this is not the case. You know how many people a movie has to go through to get made and put up with that level of marketing and that amount of screenings? Like, are you serious? The idea that these disappointed fans have that this second movie was made this way as not an artistic risk or choice, but instead was made because powers that be wanted to like stop a movement happening and didn't like the message of the first movie is so insane. Like I almost feel like I shouldn't even be like exploring it or humoring it.
Anyways, thank you for watching. Be sure to call me a gay liberal cuck in the comments below. And please subscribe. I give this movie 7 out of 10. Thank you.